Hey, Clemson family, welcome to the 6th episode of the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. We want to be your source for analysis of the Tigers in 2022. Go ahead and hit that subscribe or that follow button if you enjoy our approach. You can also find us at clemsonkickoff.com. I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley, and we got another busy show to get to and a lot going on. And we'll start off with ACC Media Days, which are coming up next week in Charlotte. We know who's going to be attending for the Tigers and looking forward to that. It's a pretty interesting group that Clemson's going to be taking with the three players who will be going with Dabo Swinney.
Yep, I'm going to be interested to hear what they've got to say. It's defensive end KJ Henry, who I think emerged, even though he hasn't been a starter, I think he's emerged as a leader on that defensive unit. Jordan McFadden, the left tackle, who's an unquestioned leader of that offensive line. And then quarterback DJ Uiagalelei.
Yeah, I like this group. I do. I think you're right, Bill, too, about KJ Henry, because KJ was a 5-star recruit, going to be a superstar, all those things. But it's taken him some time to grow into that. But as far as being a leader, he really has really stepped up into that role, and I like it. Jordan McFadden has been maybe a leader since he's been there, right? It certainly feels like it. And in DJ, you would think you're taking your starting quarterback, and he's going to be a leader for this team this season. I'm really interested to hear what DJ has to say. It's going to be a lot of questions, I'm sure, about last year and the struggles last year and how he's grown from that. And I'm sure there'll be questions about Cade Klubnik as well. So this is a really interesting trio that Clemson's going to be taking to Charlotte.
I think Uiagalelei is going to get quite a bit of attention. He's possibly the leader in Clemson NIL, so to speak, had the big deal last year. He fought through some injuries last season. He does have the somewhat of a challenge from Klubnik. I don't think it's really as big in reality as it's perceived out there necessarily. So this is a chance for Dabo Swinney to let Uiagalelei get out there, tell his story, talk about the things he's worked on. Spring training in baseball, we all joke about the best shape of his life story, but apparently Uiagalelei has lost quite a bit of weight. He's working out hard. He's making sure that he's ready to lead this team. People talk about, hey, yeah, well, he'd better because he's pressed a little bit by a 5-star freshman who's now on the roster in Cade Klubnik.
Yeah, and I think maybe, like you said, maybe Cade's not there to start right now, but at least there is that little bit of a threat that you have a guy behind you who's really talented. There's also Hunter Johnson, and so it's not just one guy. It didn't feel like that was there last year. So there was no real threat to losing your job, no matter what was going to happen. So hopefully he's healthy. He had the problem with the knee. That kind of flared up in the Louisville game. If you remember that game where he scored the touchdown at the end there, just kind of limping, looked really like he was on one leg. He had the fingertip problem on his throwing hand, which obviously as a quarterback, you don't want to have any problems with your throwing hand. So hopefully he's healthy and ready to go. And I'm with you. I think that it's exciting when you get the new quarterback and he's a 5-star and he's from Texas and, all those things. But I'm looking forward to seeing what DJ can do this year. I think he's going to have a bounce back year. Now, is he going to be a Heisman candidate like he was talked about last year and all the hype going into last season? Maybe not, but I think he can play much better than he played last year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he talks about that, how he handles all that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. That is Wednesday, July 20th, and then again on the 21st, ACC Media Days. And let's move a little more pointedly into what to expect on the field this season from Clemson, and we'll talk about the cornerbacks. Sheridan Jones finished the season strong last year and is expected to be a starter, and a lot of talk about Nate Wiggins probably getting the other starting nod across from him, although cornerbacks coach Mike Reed, who I have a ton of respect for and would not have been upset if he had been Clemson's defensive coordinator this year, really says he doesn't have a depth chart yet, according to Clemson Insider.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And I think it's probably pretty accurate, and it's probably about right with what you've got. If you said what are the biggest question marks for Clemson's team going into 2022, obviously everybody's going to point to quarterback for all the reasons we just talked about. But also you look at the offensive line. But then on defense, it really feels like the one question mark is this group at cornerback. And not because there's not talent, but when you lose an Andrew Booth and a Mario Goodrich, you don't just lose guys like that and say, okay, we're going to be just as good as we were last year. These players who are coming up are going to have to step into new roles, whether that's being a starter, whether that's playing more, if you were on the depth chart last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Much like you, I'm not a big fan of comps, but I can't help thinking back to that year when Ryan Carter had to step up and was hopefully going to be sort of that complementary back on one side, and kind of ended up being a shutdown instead of just, a capable number two. And I think when you look at Sheridan Jones and what he's been able to show late last season, when you look at Nate Wiggins, the tremendous early flash from him and the potential that we're hearing about from him, you've got pretty good options right there as a couple of starters, and a couple other guys who could push and maybe crack that starting lineup. Fred Davis, who was a huge recruit out of Jacksonville when he signed with Clemson, had an unexpectedly quiet season last year, possibly in part a little bit distracted by the auto accident that he had. And then Malcolm Green, really capable, looked great as a freshman, but has been fighting a shoulder injury and still not as back to practice.
Right. And then you've got the two freshmen. And I think that's where this group can really maybe take another step up, because the players we've mentioned are really good players and they've been in the mix. And if they can take this next step, then okay, I think you got something. But then you look at the two freshmen who were enrolled early with Jaden Lucas and Toriano Pride, they both are really impressive. And I know Lucas was hurt during the spring, but I think the young guys have a chance to really do something. And you've heard Coach Reed talking about them. You've heard Coach Goodwin talking about them, Coach Kahn, that these are really talented young guys joining this group. So really looking forward to seeing what they can add to the room and seeing where they can go and what kind of playing time they can get as we move forward into this 2022 season.
When we talked about safeties in the last episode, we said, hey, Andrew Makuba is proof that when a freshman comes in and shows that he can take care of the job, what did Dabo Swinney used to say? Game recognizes game. That was kind of the phrase that guided him through his decision on Kelly Bryant versus Trevor Lawrence. It doesn't get any bigger than that. You would think he and the co-defensive coordinators and Mike Reed would all be willing to say, hey, look, the freshman is good. Let's get him in there, whether it's Pride, whether it's Lucas. If they look like they are the most reliable option, they'll get time on the field. And I think that's the thing about it, is reliability for me. We've talked about defensive backs have one of the toughest tasks in college football. And even if he gives up a catch, to be in position to make that tackle rather than give up 6 points on a big play, that may be the guy or two who ends up on the field.
And you mentioned it in a couple of other episodes, Bill, about being a little more simplified on defense. Well, what does that do? That helps freshmen. And if these freshmen can jump into that role, maybe they get on the field a little bit more and should just go play without thinking too much. And then there's also the name that you just mentioned there, Andrew Makuba. I mean, I think one of the things that surprised me during the spring was how much he was helping at corner and how much time he was getting at corner. And was it because he's going to play in the slot or just versatility, whatever it was? It felt like they were trying to use him at cornerback to showcase his skills a little bit. So if he's cross-training there, if he's helping out there, that could be a big part of this group as well. Because we saw last year, like I said, just how talented he is. One of the best freshman seasons we've seen from a Clemson player in a long time. So there's talent there. There really is. It's maybe untapped, unchallenged, inexperienced a little bit. But there's talent there for Coach Reed to work with. And Coach Reed is done a really good job with these cornerbacks since he's been at Clemson. And I'm excited to see how he can mold these guys into really good players.
And he's going to have a chance early, let's face it, to kind of mold these guys. Georgia Tech probably is not going to have a strong passing attack. Furman, you don't think will. Louisiana Tech, if they're going to put points on the board, it probably will be through the passing game. But they're a CUSA team. They went 3-9 last year. So you hope the defensive line can kind of carry the load there and make things a little easier on those corners and safeties. It might not be until week 4 against Wake Forest that they really get heavily tested. But the big challenge for them is going to come in week 5 against Devin Leary and NC State. So you hope they'll have had time to prepare on the field by then. Hopefully everybody's going to be healthy and they'll be able to put their best form out there.
Right. And back-to-back, Sam Hartman and Leary, that's tough. That will challenge you as a defense. Now, Clemson last year lost NC State, and it wasn't all on the defense, but the defense did give up some yards in that game. But against Wake Forest, we saw Clemson really shut down that mesh attack. There was a lot of blitzing. There was a lot of attack up front by the Clemson defensive line. The secondary played really well. But Wake Forest is a really good team. Even with the success that Wake Forest had last year, winning the division, it feels like most people are still going to always overlook Wake Forest. And that's not wise to do with the offensive attack they've got and the talent they've got in that group, because it's a really good group. And Dave Clawson is one of the best coaches in the country. I know he coaches at Wake, and he's not going to get the attention that some other coaches get, but he's one of the best coaches in the country, and they'll get the most out of this team pretty much every season.
And we have kind of naturally moved into talking about Wake Forest, but they were on our docket to preview for the upcoming season. We mentioned Sam Hartman. We mentioned Dave Clawson. Offensive coordinator Warren Ruggiero, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, has also been on the field for, I believe, 9 years at Wake. So there's a lot of cohesiveness. Sam Hartman almost has that kind of Hunter Renfrow feel to him. Wow, he's still there. He's going to bring a lot of experience. And I'll tell you what, there was a recent, what do they call it, the Clemson Takeover on the ACC network, and I rewatched that game, and he kept them in that game better than I'd realized at the time. You know, it kind of felt like that early burst really handed the game to Clemson early, and I think a lot of casual observers maybe labeled it as more of a going away victory than it really had been. Hartman being a big reason for it. He kept his poise. Yeah, he made some mistakes that were really costly. Those mistakes may ultimately have been what cost him the game, but I'll tell you what, there was no quitting that guy. He kept at it. He kept going. They're going to have Clemson at home this year, and it's not going to be any easy feat to take care of Wake Forest.
It's not. And the thing about Wake Forest is this year's group has a lot of returning production for that team. And you mentioned Sam Hartman. He threw for 4,200 yards last year. Christian Turner is back at running back. He ran for 500 yards. A.T. Perry. I mean, A.T. Perry is one of the best wide receivers in the country. He had 1,200 yards receiving. And then offensively, I think the key for them is they've got 80% of their offensive line starts back. And a hat tip to Matt Fortuna for us at The Athletic. He's got the story on Wake Forest, and he has the numbers of 80% of their starts on the offensive line. And that's huge for this team, because if you have that group up front that's veteran, you've got a veteran quarterback, you've got a veteran wide receiver, that makes you a really, really dangerous group up front, or group offensively. And Clemson's going to have to play well up there. I know Clemson won last year by a pretty solid margin, but that was a game in the third quarter, even though Clemson jumped on Wake early. Like you said, Wake kept fighting back. They kept getting back into the game, and Clemson had to finally put Wake away. That's what you would expect from a Dave Clawson coach team. It's not going to quit. It's going to keep fighting. And when you've got a quarterback and an offensive line and a wide receiver like they have, that makes for a dangerous Saturday afternoon for sure.
Pretty confident in Clemson's front seven against that Wake offensive line, because that was just Hartman made some mistakes, but he had guys on him all day. That slow mesh really wasn't working for them against the speed of that Clemson front seven, the ability of that Clemson front seven. I think maybe there will be some tweaks to that. I don't know how much slow mesh we'll see this year, what they'll have up their sleeve. I don't know what they'll bring to the table that'll be different and try to take Clemson out of its comfort level against that. But I do think between that expected boost up front for Clemson, that expected advantage for Clemson up front, the loss of wide receiver Jakari Robinson, you don't know who the number 2 option is going to be out there. The loss of leading rusher Christian Beal-Smith, who goes to South Carolina, so we'll be talking about him in a later episode. It doesn't get easier for Sam Hartman this year.
No, it doesn't. But Sam's a really good player, and they'll adjust. And that's the thing about Dave Clawson and his group. It always seems to, okay, when you think you've caught up with what they're doing, they do something different. So, we'll see how that works in this game. I think, Bill, last year, a huge part of that game was Clemson's running game, right? I mean, DJ Uiagalelei didn't play great in that game. He had made a couple of plays. There was a long throw down to Bo Collins when DJ broke through the pass rush, but really Kobe Pace in that running game took over offensively for that game. So can Wake stand up to that? Again, they've got a lot of production back on their defense. They've got good players, but they didn't play well defensively in that game against Clemson. And it was really kind of one of the few games all year where Clemson just kind of took over with the running game. And as we saw that later in the year, we saw it a little bit more, but it was the one game where Clemson really kind of had control of a game, that in South Carolina, pretty much from start to finish. So what will Wake do to slow down that running game will be an interesting part of this as well.
The Wake defense does lose its leading tackler from last season in Luke Masterson. It also loses its top corner in Jasir Taylor. So there will be some opportunities for the Clemson offense to improve over last season, which I think might be necessary because, like you said, there's no quit in this Wake Forest offense. You don't know if the defense is going to have as successful a game. I think I would predict it, but there's no guarantees. And so you may need that offense from Clemson to come through a little more in order to get the win here.
Yeah, you probably will. And we'll see. Again, that's the fourth game of the season. You would hope by that point that Clemson has had 3 easy wins and has gotten a lot of guys on the field like we've talked about in previous episodes. And let's see a lot of these players get some time in these early games, because I do believe as people who follow Clemson football, maybe some people have gotten a little spoiled about what's happened the last decade. But there's a couple of little pockets in this season that are going to be tough, and back-to-back against Wake and NC State could be tough. The Miami game could be tough. Notre Dame could be tough. So you're going to have to be ready to play. I even said earlier, a Saturday afternoon, this may be a night game. So that could be a lot of fun as well. It will be really cool to see how this offense grows for Clemson from what we saw last year to what we see the first couple of games this year, and then going into this Wake Forest game, because this could be really the first true test that we see for this team this season.
Well, I'm just taking a quick look at Twitter, and I'm not seeing any more conferences blowing anything up among the Power 5 / now Power 2. So let's close out a little bit with baseball commits. I know you've been watching this a little more closely than I have, but tell us a little more about a few of the guys who plan to make it to Clemson in the coming years, including right-hand pitcher Drew Titsworth out of Frankenmuth, Michigan.
Yeah, Drew's a 2023 commit. He had been committed to Michigan, and then he flipped with Eric Bakich and the staff coming from Michigan. So he's going to flip from Michigan to Clemson. Brendan Bennett is another one. He's 2024. So Bennett is the 6th former Michigan commit who has flipped to Clemson, and that includes Joe Allen in 2022, Nolan Naraki in 2022, Jack Crichton in 2022. Those are guys who are going to be on this year's team, so they can help this coming year's Clemson team. And then you have Dylan Head, and then you mentioned Drew Titsworth in 2023, and then Brendan Bennett in 2024. So you're starting to see what Coach Bakich and that staff can do on the recruiting trail. It'll be interesting to see if Clemson gets any more transfers for this year, and then what that staff can continue to do as it recruits for the upcoming seasons. Now you've got to see the coaching staff actually work with the team is going to be fun as we move into the school year. I mean, we're only maybe a month away from players being in classes for the fall and those kinds of things as we get ready for the fall season for baseball. So you're starting to see this coaching staff really put together the players it wants and what kind of player it's looking for as it goes forward.
It was interesting to me to see the pitchers on board because, Bakich didn't bring his pitching coach from Michigan with him. He brought one in from Florida State instead. And obviously they are sold on his track record and have faith that Bakich made the right call there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was reading, there's been so many of them. It's hard to, I think it was Drew Titsworth was talking about meeting the staff and how he just immediately was like, okay, I've got to go to Clemson. And he saw the campus and like, okay, I've never seen anything like this with the facilities and those kinds of things. And that's what it's as little success that as Clemson has had the last 10 years or so, you forget that the facilities are there at Clemson. And one of the best stadiums in the country, and this is one of the best programs in the country. So, in as far as long-term history, I know it's not there right now, but that is what people think of Clemson. So it's interesting to see what the staff can get done. But I like what we're seeing from the staff. I like what Coach Bakich and his crew is trying to get done. And now, you just go get to work with these players once they're on campus.
Name I blinked over there was Jimmy Bellinger, the new pitching coach at Clemson after several solid seasons at Florida State. So going to be interesting to keep an eye on things there, see how the commits and transfers can keep piling up for the Tigers and what that roster is going to look like in the coming season. All right, well, in the next episode, we will move over to the offensive side of the ball and talk wide receivers, natural progression to cross over from corners. We will look at NC State, which will be the Week 5 matchup for the Tigers, and obviously, we'll keep you posted on anything breaking in the meantime.
And we'll get you ready for the ACC Media Days, which will be coming up in Charlotte next week. It's going to be a lot of fun.
There you go. Well, I hope everyone has enjoyed this, and we are glad you found us, Clemson family. Like I said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that follow button. That's free, so you don't want to miss out anytime we post. We're going to react to all the big news that's happening around Clemson athletics. Give us a rating, give us a like. Go ahead and comment. We will bring in some of the more insightful comments or questions that you have and discuss them as well. Our homepage has some great resources. Check us out at clemsonkickoff.com. All our important links are there where else you can find us in the podcast world. You can follow us on Twitter as well, Clemson Kickoff. We're going to retweet news as it happens. We'll give a few quick hit opinions here and there in real time. We're also on Facebook at Reign Supreme Alway. So until our next episode, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
And I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.